My name is Omar S., and for as long as I can remember, my life has been rooted in faith. I've stood at the heart of my community, not for praise, but to serve. As an Imam, I carried the responsibility of guiding souls, lifting burdens, and reminding people of Allah's mercy. When we moved to this new land, it wasn't just a change of scenery, it was a calling. I believed I was sent here to share the beauty of Islam, to be a voice of light where it was needed most. My family followed me with open hearts, trusting in the path laid before us. But what I didn't know was that this journey would test me in ways I'd never faced before. Everything I'd built, everything I stood for, was about to be shaken. And the next chapter? It would change everything. From the outside, it seemed like I had it all together. Every day, from sunrise to sunset, I gave my all, leading prayers, offering guidance, sharing words meant to lift broken spirits. People came to me with their pain, their questions, their hopelessness, and I reminded them of Allah's mercy and the strength that lies in trust. I truly believed my faith was solid, that nothing could shake it. I was wrong. The year I turned 67, something shifted. It started small, just a dull ache in my stomach. I brushed it off, convinced it was nothing. But the pain grew sharper, more persistent. My wife, always more attentive to my well-being than I was, urged me to see a doctor. I went, mostly to ease her worry. I wasn't ready for what came next. After endless tests and tense waiting, the diagnosis hit like a storm: stage 4 stomach cancer. In that moment, everything paused. I was no longer the Imam with answers. I was a man staring at his mortality. But deep down, I knew this wasn't random. It wasn't punishment. It was my test. Just as the prophets were tested with trials beyond comprehension, this was written for me, and I made a promise, to myself, to Allah, that I would not face this in fear. I would meet it head-on, with faith as my armor. The moment treatment started, my life changed completely. Chemotherapy hit me like a storm, waves of pain, sickness, and exhaustion crashing over me again and again. Each session left me more drained than the last. My body felt like it was breaking, but I held tight to something stronger than flesh: my faith. Even in the worst moments, I chose not to drown in despair. As the drugs flowed into my veins, I quietly repeated prayers, turning each heartbeat into a conversation with Allah. When sleep abandoned me at night, I found comfort in the Quran. Its verses wrapped around my pain like a healing balm, reminding me I was never alone. Still, I'd be lying if I said I never questioned. Some nights, I stared into the dark, wondering, why me? Why this? But the doubt never stayed long. I'd think of the prophets, how they suffered, how they stayed the course, how their faith never cracked. That became my anchor. This was the journey written for me. And no matter how steep or painful the climb, I was going to walk it. With patience, with purpose, and with trust in the one who never abandons his servant. One evening, after a round of chemotherapy that left me completely spent, I came home feeling like a shadow of myself. I eased into my chair, hoping to find a moment of relief. But something felt wrong. A tightness crept into my chest, subtle at first, then sharper, heavier. My breath shortened, my heart raced. I tried to call out, but no sound came. Panic surged through me, then everything went black. What happened next defied all logic. I opened my eyes, but not in the way I expected. I was no longer in my body. I was above it, watching everything unfold below like a scene from someone else's life. I saw my wife, frozen in fear, tears streaming down her face, hands trembling as paramedics rushed in, performing CPR on the lifeless form that used to be me. But strangely, I wasn't afraid. There was no chaos, only stillness. A calm, quiet awareness surrounded me. I wasn't supposed to be here, yet I was, watching, feeling, existing in a space between worlds. And in that moment, a powerful realization dawned on me. Death isn't the end. It's a door, and I was standing right at the threshold. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was still here, but no words came. I had no voice. I was just watching, floating somewhere above the chaos, invisible and unheard. The room, once so familiar, now felt distant, like I was seeing it through a veil. Everything moved in slow motion. The flashing lights, the hurried hands of the paramedics, my wife's cries cutting through the noise like shards of glass. I reached for her, willed myself to touch her shoulder, to offer some sign, but my hand passed through the air like mist. Then something shifted. A subtle glow appeared in the distance, not sharp or blinding, but warm, like the rising sun on a winter morning. It pulled at me, not with force, but with comfort, the kind that speaks without words. Come, you're safe. The room below began to dissolve into shadow. The pain that had anchored me for so long, the cancer, the exhaustion, the fear, was gone. In its place, a sense of weightlessness, of release. It was like I had stepped out of the storm and into silence. And yet I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I felt more alive in that moment than I had in years. Every detail around me was sharp, every flicker of emotion, every unspoken prayer hanging in the air. I could feel the heartbreak of my wife, the urgency of the medics, even the quiet desperation lingering in the corners of the room. I was fully aware, just not there. Was this death? If it was, it wasn't what I had expected. There were no shadows, no terror, just clarity, just peace. As I drifted toward that inviting light, everything else began to blur. The chaos, the voices, the machines, all fading behind me. I didn't resist. I couldn't. The light felt like a home I had never known, but always longed for. And as it wrapped around me like an embrace, I realized something profound. This was not the end. It was a transition, a passage. I had spent my entire life speaking of the unseen, of the hereafter, of the soul's journey beyond the body. Now, I was living it. And nothing could have prepared me for the truth that was about to unfold. As I drifted closer to the light, something unexpected stirred the stillness, a sound, soft and distant, like an echo from another lifetime. At first, it was just a murmur, barely audible. But then, like a tide rolling in, it grew clearer. It was my mother's voice. She was humming a lullaby, the same gentle tune she used to sing over me when I was a child. I hadn't heard it in decades, but somehow it reached into a place inside me I didn't even know was still alive. Then another voice followed, my father's. Calm, steady, reciting a prayer before sunset, just as he used to every evening. These weren't just memories. They felt real, present, as though I was back there again. In that moment, the light around me seemed to carry the very essence of my past. Not just sights and sounds, but emotions, smells, 1,000 little fragments of life I had long forgotten. I saw my childhood home, the small prayer hall where I first stood before a congregation, the faces of people I had counseled, smiled with, cried with. All of it, illuminated in the glow of that light, came rushing back. And with it came peace, so deep, so complete, it brought tears to my eyes. Not from sorrow, but from a joy so pure it broke something open in me. This, I thought, This must be the nearness of Allah. I had never felt so whole. But just as I began to surrender to that warmth, something shifted. The light that once held me began to fade. A chill crept in, subtle at first, then undeniable. The voices that had brought me comfort were gone, replaced by whispers. Not comforting ones, but harsh, cold, unsettling. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was enough. Something wasn't right. The light dimmed. The air grew thick, and a grey haze swallowed the horizon. The ground beneath me, once warm and soft, turned cold and cracked beneath my feet. I looked around and saw trees, but not the trees of paradise. These were dark, skeletal things, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The peace I had felt was replaced by a weight, heavy, suffocating. Then the sounds began, faint cries at first, like wind moving through an empty house. But they grew. Moans turned into wails, cries of pain, of despair, men, women, children. The sounds of suffering surrounded me. I stood frozen, not in fear, but in awe. In that moment I understood. This was not a dream. It was a revelation, a glimpse of what lies beyond the veil, both the beauty we hope for and the warnings we too often ignore. This was no longer about me. It was about truth, and truth, once seen, demands to be shared. The cries didn't just echo in my ears, they sank into me, as if each scream was being etched into my soul. I could feel their pain, their sorrow, and it was unbearable. I wanted to shut it out, cover my ears, close my eyes, anything to make it stop. But I couldn't. I was trapped in it, surrounded by suffering that felt all too real. Then I heard a voice, a scream, raw and filled with agony. It tore through the air and froze me where I was. It was familiar, heartbreakingly so. And when I realized who it belonged to, my entire being shattered. It was my mother, but she wasn't singing to me this time. She was crying out for mercy, begging through sobs. The lullabies I once found comfort in were now replaced by her desperate wails. No. I tried to speak, to protest, but no sound came out. Only silence. And the darkness around me grew heavier. This wasn't just the absence of light. It was a living thing, pressing in, suffocating, almost sentient in its weight. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My chest felt like it was caving in under the sheer force of it. Panic rose, but there was nowhere to run, no escape. Then, a voice, deep, thunderous, and absolute, cut through the black. It wasn't like the whispers. This voice filled the space, filled me. Omar, everything will now be revealed. The sound of my name spoken like that sent chills through me. It wasn't cruel, but it carried such immense authority that I felt like a speck, small, exposed, and utterly vulnerable. I didn't understand what was about to happen, but I knew I was standing on the edge of something irreversible. This was no longer a moment of reflection or even transition. This was judgment, and I was in its grip. The darkness thickened. No up, no down, just an endless void that pressed against my mind like 1,000 weights. The cries grew louder, no longer distant. They were all around me. Screams that didn't just carry sound, but sorrow so intense it felt like it was being poured into my bones. Every breath burned. The air was filled with the stench of rot, like the very essence of decay. I tried to look away, to shut it out, but there was no hiding here. Then shapes emerged from the black. Figures, twisted, broken, their bodies contorted in pain. Their faces locked in expressions of eternal suffering. They reached out with trembling hands, not to threaten me, but to beg, for mercy, for release. Men, women, children, all imprisoned in this realm of torment. And somehow I could feel every ounce of their pain as if it were my own. I wanted to help. I wanted to scream that I was sorry, that I didn't know. But I couldn't move. Something unseen held me still. Then, in the midst of the chaos, I saw it. A throne. It rose above everything, tall and imposing, carved with ancient patterns that seemed to shift in the shadows. It was breathtaking yet terrifying, a structure of power and mystery, but also dread. This throne wasn't made for glory. It wasn't welcoming. It radiated judgment. It was the center of this place. And I understood now, I wasn't here to pass through. I was here to face the truth. There he was, sitting on a throne wrapped in chains. Heavy, rusted shackles bound his wrists and ankles, their weight dragging him downward like anchors of sorrow. His head hung low, face hidden, posture broken. The sight gripped me. I couldn't look away, even as something cold settled in my chest. Who was he? Why was he here, in this place of pain? Slowly, almost painfully, the figure lifted his head. And when our eyes met, my breath caught. My knees nearly gave out. It was the face of Prophet Yusuf, the same Yusuf whose story I had shared with countless hearts, the one I spoke about in sermons, his patience, his forgiveness, his unwavering trust in Allah. His life had been a source of light for generations, and yet here he was, not triumphant, but shackled, not at peace, but burdened with pain. Number it couldn't be. This had to be a mistake. His gaze met mine, and in it I didn't just see sadness, I felt it, a sorrow so deep it echoed through my soul. I wanted to ask, to cry out, to beg for answers, but no words came. My body refused to move. All I could do was stand there, crushed by the weight of what I was witnessing. He's a prophet, I thought. He's one of the beloved. He doesn't belong here. This place is for the lost, the broken, the guilty, not him. Doubt exploded inside me. Had everything I believed been wrong? Had I misunderstood the truth behind the stories I spent my life preaching? Then, once again, the voice returned, deep, resonant, impossible to ignore. Omar, do you see now? Do you understand? My voice finally cracked through the silence. No, I don't understand, I shouted, my words echoing into the void. Why is he here? Why am I here? This isn't how it's supposed to be. The voice didn't respond. Instead, the darkness around me began to ripple and shift. Smoke turned to images, vague at first, then crystal clear, scenes from my life. I saw myself speaking to others, offering comfort, reciting verses of hope. I saw people leaning on my words, trusting me to guide them. Those moments gave me strength. But then the images changed. I saw memories I had buried deep. Moments of silence when I should have spoken. Moments of doubt when I wore a mask of certainty. Flashes of times when I preached with passion, but questioned everything inside. Moments when my faith faltered, not loudly but quietly, dangerously. These weren't just memories, they were revelations, and I couldn't deny them. Why? I whispered, my voice now shaking. I served you, I gave my life to you. Why am I seeing this? The voice came again, gentler but just as powerful. You sought the truth, Omar, but did you truly find it? Did you truly know me? That question hit harder than anything else. I thought I did. I thought a lifetime of prayer, sermons, and devotion was enough. But in that moment, I realized I had never stopped to ask that question with my whole heart. Who is Allah? Not just in words, not just in books, but in essence, in surrender, in trust, in silence. I had spoken about him endlessly. But had I really known him? Now I was being shown the difference. The doubts I had hidden for years, deep, quiet questions I never dared speak, were now clawing their way to the surface, and with them came a fear I'd never known. It felt like the ground beneath my soul had cracked open. Everything I thought was solid, everything I had built my life on, was crumbling. I turned back toward Prophet Yusuf, hoping, begging for something. A word, a gesture, anything to help me understand. But he just looked at me, his face etched with sorrow, as though my pain was his own. There was no anger in his eyes, only heartbreak, and that, more than anything, destroyed me. I fell to my knees, tears blurring my vision, the weight of it all pressing down on me like a mountain. "Why won't you speak?" I cried. "Why won't you tell me what this means?" But there was no reply, only silence, and the darkness that seemed to breathe around me, alive and unyielding. My faith, once a fortress, now felt like a flickering flame, fragile against the storm. I had spent a lifetime speaking of belief, of divine mercy and guidance. Yet here I was, lost, alone, watching even the prophets suffer in silence. Then the voice returned, steady and absolute. "Omar, the truth is before you. Will you have the courage to face it?" I didn't know what that meant. What truth? What was I supposed to see? What was I supposed to do? All I knew was this: my life would never be the same again. The voice came again, this time deeper, more resonant. It didn't come from any one place. It came from everywhere. Inside me, around me, through me. Who is God? The question struck like lightning. My heart seized. My mind spiraled. Who is God? I had said his name in prayer thousands of times. I had spoken about his mercy, his justice, his power. I had guided others toward him. But now, standing in this strange, trembling place, the question didn't feel theological. It felt personal. It pierced through all the layers of ritual and recitation and reached something raw within me. My lips moved instinctively to answer. But no words came out. The voice pressed again, firm and unwavering. "What do you truly know of me? Have you ever questioned what you believe? Or have you simply accepted what was handed to you?" I clutched my chest. The weight of those words was suffocating. I thought I knew. I had studied, preached, devoted my entire existence to serving God. But here, in this void, stripped of pride, stripped of everything, I felt exposed, small, unsure. The voice echoed louder now. "Who is God?" And suddenly the darkness around me shifted. It moved like smoke, swirling until it formed images, sharp and vivid. The first was of a grand temple, ancient and towering, its walls covered in strange carvings. I saw people bowing before idols, offering reverence with bowed heads and whispered chants. I knew this place. Pre-Islamic Arabia, the age of ignorance. Jahiliyyah. I'd preached about it countless times. The idols stood in a circle, grotesque, lifeless stone, but worshipped as though they held divine power. Among them, I recognized names: Allat, Al-Uzza, Manat. Then the voice returned, "Where was Allah in this place, Omar? Was he not named among these gods?" My heart pounded. I knew what the voice was saying. Before Islam's revelation, the Arabs did believe in Allah, but not as the one. They saw him as a chief among many, called on only in moments of desperation, yet worshipped beside idols. I had always regarded this as history, a distant past corrected by truth. But in that vision, it felt close, too close. The scene shifted again. Another land, another people. It was Canaan. I saw a crowd offering sacrifices around a massive idol. Their chants echoed in the air. I recognized the figure. Baal, an ancient god of storms and fertility. But when I looked closer, I noticed something strange carved into the idol's base. El. I whispered it aloud, shaken. That word. It was the ancient Semitic name for God, shared in Hebrew and Arabic. The realization hit me hard. Election, Baal, Allah. Were they connected? Had the name of the true God been entangled with the names of false ones throughout time? The voice pierced through again. You never asked, Omar. You never sought the truth. You accepted what was given. But now, you must see for yourself. I wanted to resist, to shout that it wasn't true, but the scenes kept coming, each more confronting than the last. I saw the Kaaba, centuries before Islam, surrounded by idols, worshippers calling on Allah, yet also offering incense to stone. Then I saw the Quran, its pages flipping rapidly as if by unseen hands, the verses glowing with a light I couldn't look away from. Words I had recited for years, now sharp, alive, asking me the same question over and over. Who is Allah? What does it mean to know him? Tears streamed down my face. I clutched my head, overwhelmed, drowning in everything I thought I understood. Stop! I cried out. Please, stop! I can't take this anymore. But deep inside, I knew. The truth had only just begun to unfold. The voice didn't let go. It pressed harder, louder, over and over. Who is God? What do you truly know? The question wasn't just being asked. It was being carved into me. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The visions vanished. The darkness shattered like glass. In its place came a blinding light, overwhelming and consuming. I felt my body being pulled upward, rushed through a tunnel, weightless, breathless. My chest burned, my limbs ached. And then, air. My lungs gasped for it like it was my first breath. I opened my eyes, ceiling tiles, hospital lights, monitors beeping rhythmically. I was back. But not really. A nurse leaned over me, her voice firm but gentle. You're back. We almost lost you. I could see her lips moving, but the words barely landed. My mind wasn't in that room. I was still somewhere else. Still in that place where light and shadow had wrestled inside me, where a single question echoed like thunder. Who is God? I had survived, but I hadn't returned the same. My body was fragile, foreign, like I was wearing it for the first time. My chest rose and fell with effort, each breath a reminder of the line I had crossed. But the deeper wound wasn't in my body. It was in my soul. The question had followed me. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't ignore it. I had taught others about God for decades. I had spoken of his mercy, his power, his presence. But now, every prayer, every word from the Quran I had once recited with certainty suddenly carried a weight I had never fully grasped. It was as if the verses themselves were asking me back, do you really know the one you speak of? I tried to return to routine. I tried to silence the doubt, but nothing felt real. I avoided questions from my wife, my children, my congregation. How could I explain what I had seen? The darkness, the throne, the voice that shattered everything I thought I understood. I couldn't even explain it to myself. One morning, after another restless night, I wandered down the hospital hallway and stumbled into the chapel. It was small and quiet, simple wooden pews, soft light filtering in through a stained glass window. A cross hung on the far wall. I sat in the back, not knowing why I was there. I just needed silence. I needed something still. As I sat, Lost in my thoughts, a man entered. He wore a white clerical collar and held a small Bible. He noticed me, offered a kind smile, and sat a few rows ahead. After a moment, he turned. "You seem troubled," he said, gently. I hesitated. What could a priest know about what I had seen, about my questions, my fear? But there was something about his voice, not just calm, present. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was just there. He introduced himself as Father James, and though I had no intention of speaking, the words slowly began to spill out. Not all of them, not yet, but enough. For the first time since returning, I allowed myself to be vulnerable. Not as an imam, not as a teacher, just as a man who had seen something he couldn't explain, and who could no longer pretend that everything was the same. And in that quiet chapel, beside a man whose path to God was different from mine, I began to understand something deeper. That this journey, this search for the truth, wasn't about religion. It wasn't about identity. It was about being honest enough to ask the question, who is God? And brave enough to start listening for the answer. Before I even realized what I was doing, the words poured out of me. I told him everything. My diagnosis, the visions, the darkness, the voice that wouldn't stop asking me, who is God? I spoke of the weight of my doubt, of how my faith had been cracked open and laid bare. And Father James, to his credit, didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix it, didn't quote scripture at me to patch the hole. He just listened, quietly, patiently, as if holding space for my pain. When I finished, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. What you've experienced is sacred. When people brush that close to the edge of life, they often come back with questions. The real courage isn't in having answers. It's in daring to keep searching. His words cut through everything I had been carrying. I had spent my entire life guiding others, preaching trust and certainty, but here I was, struggling to do the very thing I had taught. He offered to meet with me regularly, to talk through my questions without pressure or agenda. At first, I hesitated. Pride doesn't let go easily, but my hunger for truth was stronger than my ego, and so I said yes. As we met week after week, something unexpected began to happen. Through our conversations, I started to see things differently, not in opposition to what I knew, but deeper than I'd ever allowed myself to go. Father James spoke to me about Jesus, about grace and forgiveness in a way that broke through the surface of my understanding. He shared verses from the Bible, one of which gripped me like a hand on my heart. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That verse echoed inside me like thunder. Was this what I'd been missing? Around this same time, the dreams returned. Every night I saw the throne again, but this time the figure I once saw bound in sorrow now stood free. No chains, no despair. He looked at me with strength in his eyes, and every time he spoke the same words, "Go find the truth." His voice was calm but urgent, and I knew deep down I couldn't ignore it any longer. After weeks of prayer, sleepless nights, and searching conversations with Father James, I made a decision, one that would change the entire course of my life. I asked to be baptized. It wasn't an easy decision. I knew the consequences. I knew it would cost me relationships, respect, maybe even my role in the life I had built. But I couldn't deny the peace in my heart, and peace like that doesn't lie. On the day of my baptism, as the water poured over my head, I felt something break, something heavy and invisible that had clung to me for years. It was as if the chains I'd seen in my dreams had shattered. I didn't just feel cleansed, I felt free. I cried, but not out of grief. I cried because for the first time in my life, I felt whole, forgiven, alive. And then something miraculous happened. The cancer that had ravaged my body began to fade. My doctors were stunned. They couldn't explain it. But I could. I knew who had healed me, not just my body, but my spirit. Every morning since, I've opened the Bible and dropped to my knees, not to beg for help, but to give thanks. My prayers have changed. My heart has changed. This journey hasn't been easy. My family, especially my daughter, struggled to understand. She felt betrayed. She told me I had abandoned my faith. Those conversations cut deep, but I kept praying, not just for strength, but for healing between us. Some wounds are still open. Others are slowly mending. And while not everyone understands the path I've chosen, I am no longer afraid of being misunderstood. Because I've found something greater. I've found truth, and it's worth everything. I'm sharing my story not to argue, not to convince, but to witness, to say with honesty and love that transformation is real. Grace is real, and the peace I feel today is unlike anything I've ever known. If this story has stirred something in you, thank you for listening. If it's opened a question in your heart, lean into it. And if it's brought you hope, I invite you to share this message, subscribe, and explore the other stories we've shared. Because the truth, real truth, is always worth seeking. So now you've heard my story, from the edge of death to a life forever changed. I didn't just survive. I was reborn, not by chance, not by medicine, but by the grace of the one who called me out of the darkness and into his light. You may agree with me, you may not. That's okay. I'm not here to argue, I'm here to testify, to show you what happens when you stop running from the question and start facing it. Who is God? If that question has ever echoed in your heart, don't ignore it. Lean in, ask, search, cry out. Because when you do, he answers. And when he does, your life will never be the same. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think, feel, or wonder, let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And please, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not just for me, but for those still searching. For those on the edge of giving up. For those waiting to hear the one message that could change everything. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story of transformation, hope, and truth. May the God who found me in the fire bless you wherever you are. May he stir your heart like he stirred mine. And may you never stop chasing the truth, because the truth is chasing you.